once said that out of 10 Chinese people, 2 dislike America. But as many as 9 hate Japan. Although the two countries normalized relations long, the land of the cherry blossom remains a target of curses in a country of millions. Most recently, a 10-year-old Japanese boy was stabbed to death in Shenzhen. This attack occurred exactly on the 93rd anniversary of the Function incident, when the Japanese military invaded northeast China in 1931. This is why extreme nationalists on the mainland propagate anti-Japanese ideology. According to a 2017 survey, Chinese people have the highest anti-Japanese sentiment, with 75% of the country's population holding negative views of, and only 22% having positive views. S video, let. The deep-rooted causes of anti-Japanese sentiment. Throughout history, China and Japan didn't have many disputes. It wasn't until the Ming Dynasty that Wokou, or Japanese pirates, began attacking coastal areas of the mainland. And later, Japan also invaded Korea, a tributary state of the Ming Dynasty. With the failure in this campaign, T dared challenge China. However, in 1868, the Meiji Restoration propelled Japan to become a leading Asian power. And then in 1894, Japan launched an attack on China. The institutional weakness of the state apparatus led to Qing casualties reaching 35,000 people, while Japanese casualties were only half at 17,000. Subsequently, the Treaty of Shimonoseki was signed on April 17, 1895, forcing the Qing dynasty to abandon its suzerainty over Korea and cede Taiwan Island and the Penghu Islands to Japan. Additionally, though not mentioned in the treaty, Japan also stealthily occupied the Senkaku Islands. After the Qing dynasty was overthrown in 1912 in the Republic of China, the country quickly fell into internal conflict and economic decline. By 1927, the nationalist communist civil war broke out, providing a perfect opportunity for Japan to. Early on July 8, 1937, Japan launched a war targeting northeast China, later expanding it nationwide. Within just 1 month, Beijing and Tianjin fell into Japanese hands. On December 13, 1937, the Imperial Japanese Army captured the capital Nanjing, and immediately 160,000 Japanese soldiers fled, capturing Chinese soldiers and dividing them into small groups. The massacre began here. Everyone from old to young, civilians to soldiers, were tortured and killed with bayonets and swords. Tens of thousands of women and children were raped and disemboweled. After 1945, the International Military Tribunal for the Far East investigated that during those horrific there were 20,000 cases of rape, over 190,000 people were massacred, bodies were burned to destroy evidence, and over 150,000 victims were brutally tortured to death. All these crimes were directly committed or condoned by the Japanese military and government. The casualty figures were later officially recognized by the Chinese government and engraved on memorial tablets. It's estimated that during the 8-year Sino-Japanese War, the death toll reached 20 million people, including both soldiers and civilians. The property damage borne by Chinese people was 383 billion, nearly 50 times Japan's gross domestic product at that time. Additionally, the number of refugees on the mainland reached 95 million, making this the bloodiest war in Asia in modern history, and also the main reason China harbors hatred for Japan. The role of America in Sino-Japanese forces gained control of China and established the people. At the same time, the nationalist government retreated to Taiwan and began organizing its administration. Shortly after its establishment, the new Chinese government signed the Sino-Soviet Treaty of Friendship, seeking support from the Soviet Union, which included a clause that one party would protect the other from attacks by Japan or any country allied with the Japanese embassy. China's concerns about its neighbor increased further when the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security was signed by Tokyo and Washington in 1952. It allowed U.S. military bases to be present on Japanese soil during the Korean War. And also in that year, Japan established diplomatic relations with the Taiwan for the mainland, which has always insisted on the One China policy. These moves from Japan further strained relations between the two countries. However, due to conflicts with the Soviet Union, the mainland began to lean towards the U.S. and its allies. Specifically, in 1972, Japan and China established diplomatic relations. At that time, Tokyo declared that it recognized its responsibility for causing immense damage to the Chinese people during World War II. and Beijing waived its claim for war reparations from Japan. Subsequently, the two countries signed the Treaty of Peace and Friendship in 1978, and Prime Minister Alhara Masayoshi announced the provision of a Thus, from 1979 to March 2022, Japan's ODA funds to China amounted to 25.37 billion United States dollars in yen loans, 1.21 billion United States dollars in grants, and 1.42 billion United. However, relations between the two sides have visibly deteriorated recently, as the country has continuously modernized its military and challenged regional powers, as well as threatened to launch a war. This has made relations with the US and Japan very tense. Therefore, when Shigeru Ishiba, former defense minister, was chosen to become the new prime minister on October 1, 2024, and more than 2 weeks later, he only sent offerings to Yasukuni Shrine instead of visiting it directly. It still faced opposition from neighboring countries, including China, South Korea, and North Korea, which had been invaded and devastated by Yasukuni, the controversial shrine. Built by Emperor Meiji in 1869, Yasukuni Shrine has a name meaning a shrine to preserve peace for the entire nation. It is one of many soul-summoning shrines built throughout Japan within the Shinto faith. But most notably, Yasukuni now commemorates the souls of nearly 2.5 million Japanese military personnel in conflicts since 1853. All were preserved at the shrine in written form, recording their names, residences, dates, and places of birth. However, among the 2.5 million commemorated at Yasukuni Shrine, there are over 1,000 convicted war criminals, including Prime Minister Tojo Hideki, who was executed in 1948 for war crimes. Because of this, visits by Japanese government leaders often provoke anger among neighboring countries, especially China, South Korea, and North Korea, which were victims of Japanese fascist invasion. In 2001, the Beijing government declared that Yasukuni is not just an internal matter of Japan, it is a touchstone to understand the Japanese government's attitude towards its history of aggression. South Korea holds a similar view. Most recently, the representative of the billion-person country, Wang Wenbin, delivered a protest note to Tokyo regarding the Japanese Kishida Fumio sending offerings to the shrine. Although China has repeatedly issued similar protest messages, the Japanese government has always appeared indifferent on this issue. The Beijing authorities have had the strongest reactions to the Yasukuni Shrine issue, but some political analysts argue that this is merely a trick by Beijing to cover up unity gaps within the current government, rather than a sign of concern about the rise of militarism in Japan. They provide more vivid examples to support this view, by showing rare tolerance. China has allowed protest groups to publicly oppose shrine visits on Japanese, while being very cautious about protests regarding domestic injustices. This can only be explained as an effort by the mainland to divert public attention from domestic issues, as well as to increase the credibility of the current government by appealing to nationalist sentiments in China. In particular, Beijing often targets the entertainment industry with campaigns to blacklist any artists showing pro-Japan tendencies. For instance, in March 2018, actor Zhang Ziyan took photos in front of cherry blossom trees in the open grounds of Yasukuni Shrine. After these photos spread on social media, along with misinformation that he had visited and worshipped at the shrine, it sparked outrage in China. Additionally, photos emerged showing Zhang Ziyan holding a wedding at Nogi Shrine in 2019. This shrine commemorates General Nogi Murazuki, one of the commanders of the Japanese forces in the Sino-Japanese War of 1894. Although the actor denied the allegations and issued an apology, many media outlets and the majority of people still accused him of being a traitor. As the People's Daily commented, Zhang Ziyan should pay a heavy price for his ignorance, and as a result, the actor had contracts terminated by 27 brands within just 4 hours. Subsequently, the China Performance Industry Association ordered a complete ban on Zhang Ziyan's entertainment activities. This happened very quickly. Within just a few days, all content related to the actor, from television dramas to fan-made content, they have almost all been removed from every streaming platform and social media site in China. Another Mandarin star, Zhao Wei, was also implicated because Zhang Ziyan is under a company where the female star and workaholic Gerger holds the majority of shares. Zhao Wei even faced renewed scrutiny for wearing an outfit featuring a stylized pattern from the Japanese military flag, which has sparked no other love. This person has participated in some anti-China protests and was like a photo that insulted the Chinese-speaking community. Although Tao Wei later apologized to the audience for not thoroughly researching before selecting the actors, which hurt the public, the film was still, given all the above controversies. Tao Wei was sanctioned by the Chinese government in 2021 and has since almost disappeared from mainstream media in the country. The dispute over the Senkaku Islands. One of the hotspots in East Asia is the issue of territorial sovereignty disputes over the Senkaku Islands, as Japan calls them, it has a significant impact on the relationship between the two countries and somewhat affects other countries in the region. The Senkaku Islands are a group of uninhabited small islands within the jurisdiction of Okinawa Prefecture. Okinawa is 420 kilometers to the west and 170 kilometers to the northeast of Japan. Claims that these islands were discovered by a Japanese person in 1879 and were incorporated into its territory in 1895 under the Treaty of Shimonoseki. The Japanese government also stated that the Senkaku Islands are no longer Taiwan's because China abandoned them according to the terms of the aforementioned treaty. China uses money to place money for countries. We can see it as a special country. China, based on historical documents left from the Ming and Qing dynasties, asserts that this group of islands has belonged to the country since, and this was also recognized by Japan until 1894 when the war occurred. In 1945, when the Japanese Empire was defeated in World War II, the island of Taiwan and its surrounding islands were returned to China. However, the Senkaku Islands are not included in the territories that Japan renounced under Article 2. Instead, both Senkaku and Okinawa were under American control. By 1972, the United States returned the administrative rights over the Okinawa Islands and other surrounding islands, including the This sparked a wave of protests from the Chinese community everywhere. China claims that the Senkaku Islands should be returned to them, which should have been done immediately after World War II. Nevertheless, the establishment of diplomatic relations and the achievement of a peace treaty between the two countries led the Chinese and Japanese governments to agree to set aside disputes. The situation had just stabilized when in 1979, Japan built a field helicopter base on this archipelago. Immediately afterward, mainland China had, by February 25, 1992, Beijing had passed a law on the territorial sea and the contiguous zone, and on this occasion, also included of course, Japan did not ignore that action and immediately issued a protest. By July 1996, a group of Japanese people had infiltrated Kitakoshima Island, a small island in the Senkaku Islands, and erected a lighthouse there. Since there were no signs of prohibition from the government, immediately afterward in August 1996, another group of young people landed on Uosuri Island. This time they planted the Japanese national flag and erected a memorial. These actions have reignited the sovereignty dispute over the Senkaku Islands between the two countries and stirred up a widespread. Hong Kong and Taiwanese people are boycotting Japanese goods. Some Chinese groups here even plan to take boats to Senkaku to destroy structures built by the Japanese. Given such a tense situation, the land of the rising sun no longer maintains an ambiguous stance as before but has affirmed its sovereignty over this archipelago. In addition, the Chinese masses in Hong Kong and Taiwan have continuously held protests condemning Japan's occupation. On the part of the Beijing government, they have reacted very cautiously in trying to restrain and avoid military clashes or conflict. Part of it is because they need to maintain economic relations with Japan and fear that provoking Japan would be interfering with the US-Japan Security Treaty Agreement. Moreover, at that time, China was viewed by many countries around the world as a security threat to the Asia-Pacific region. Therefore, if a conflict occurs, it will be difficult to avoid international public opinion turning against them. In recent years, the issue of the Senkaku Islands dispute has become increasingly heated as China has intensified its contentious actions such as regularly conducting patrols in the maritime areas they claim sovereignty. In addition, there have been many instances of Chinese military aircraft approaching the air defense identification zone, probing the Japanese side. According to surveys, the waters around the Senkaku Islands are rich in fish, and the seabed contains large reserves of oil and natural gas. It is also located near the Taiwan Strait and the Okinawa Islands, giving an important geostrategic position, which is why the relevant countries are even more eager to assert that China also has a propaganda campaign targeting Okinawa land on June 4, 2023, in a front-page article of the People's Daily. President Xi Jinping personally spoke about the history of the Ryukyu Kingdom, clearly stating his position that 600 years ago, but currently it is Japan's Okinawa Prefecture. This place not only has many US military bases, but is also an important geopolitical link in security efforts in the Indo-Pacific region. If the United States and China conflict over the Taiwan issue, Okinawa will be where the stars sang. Currently, among the 55,000 U.S. military personnel in Japan, as many as 30,000 are present in the south. It can be seen that Okinawa is becoming a test case for China's efforts to use more conciliatory language to promote an order centered on harmony. Most recently, Dalian Maritime University in China is planning to open a research center for S warning when wanting to raise the issue of Okinawa. To deter Tokyo from interfering in Taiwan, which Beijing claims is an internal. This move comes at a time when the U.S. is strengthening security cooperation with the land of the rising sun, with particular attention to the possibility. This has once again fueled anti-Japanese sentiment in China. Issues from World War II have caused much resentment among the Chinese people, including Japan leaving at least 2 million tons of chemical weapons in many places, posing a major threat to the mainland's people and environment. It wasn't until 1999 that the two countries agreed to destroy these weapons. Under the agreement, Japan would provide all necessary funding, technology, experts, and resources. Initially, the destruction process was expected to be completed by 2007, but was then extended to 2012 and continued to be postponed until 2012. To date, Japan has not provided full information about this incident, while the handling work has only been resolved passively. Additionally, in some history textbooks, Japan only provides brief reference materials about their war crimes. This makes both China and South Korea very angry, believing that the Japanese government is trying to cover up past sins. Liberal Democratic Party deny the government. A euphemism for sexual slavery. This increases the hatred of Chinese people towards their neighbor. As in 2004, when the AFC Asian Cup was held in China and Japan had to face the host country. Before the match, Japanese fans were advised by local police not to use banners, flags, instruments, or team uniforms, and were even asked not to cheer. Fans had very extreme actions like burning flags, throwing objects, and shouting during the Japanese team. But with superior strength, the Japanese team easily defeated China 3-1 in the final when football fans in the host country rioted. It can be seen that whenever sports tournaments take place, Chinese people always express strong opposition to teams from Japan, because they feel Japan has not atoned for its brutal actions in World War II. Besides, anti-Japanese sentiment has also been strongly expressed through anti-Japanese war films shown on the mainland, with over 200 such films produced each year. And of course, Japanese characters in films are always the villain. But unlike in history, in films they appear very weak and only defeat Chinese people with dirty tricks, while Chinese martial artists can fight 1 against 100. Therefore, at peak times, actors playing Japanese soldiers had to die out to 8. These films receive strong support from the government as they vigorously promote Han-Chinese nationalism. Not only in films, Chinese hatred of Japanese people also flows throughout social media. Many websites popular with young Chinese people run very aggressive and violent slogans such as "Exterminate the Japanese dogs" or "Destroy the Japanese people." Therefore, relations between the two countries are often tense, and China usually reacts strongly to its neighbor's move. As in August 2023, Japan announced it would begin discharging radioactive wastewater, and this is water used to cool the reactors at the Fukushima nuclear power plant, following the 2011 earthquake and tsunami disaster. For its part, Japan stated that this radioactive wastewater had been safely and pledged that the discharge complies with international safety standards. But China criticized this move and ordered a ban on all seafood imports from the land of cherry blossoms. Previously, the billion-person country was the most important market for Japanese fishermen, with seafood export value reaching nearly 500. This decision by President Xi Jinping has severely impacted the economy of Japan's northern Hokkaido, as the income of people here largely depends on demand from the billion-person country. The Beijing authorities also launched a media campaign, portraying the Fukushima incident as selfish and irresponsible. This had a huge impact on public perception when Fukushima wastewater began being discharged into the sea. Some Chinese people panicked, and many even went to grocery stores to hoard salt, believing that sea salt would now be contaminated. But recently, Xinhua news agency reported that both countries have conducted multiple rounds of consultations and reached agreement. Specifically, China can participate in monitoring the discharge, as well as take independent samples, and will gradually resume importing seafood from Japan if quality standards and requirements are met. Returning to the case of the Japanese boy stabbed to death in Shenzhen, the motive behind such incidents is likely due to widespread anti-Japanese sentiment in China, especially since last year. On July 1, 2023, the revised anti-espionage law officially took effect in China. At the same time, a major campaign to suppress espionage activities was launched in many major cities, including Beijing. This campaign calls on Chinese people to monitor foreign spies, or any Chinese citizens who assist. Citizens must immediately report to authorities if they detect anything suspicious. From there, a nationwide spy hunt took place. The serious consequences made Japanese schools on the mainland become targets. The cause originated from false rumors spreading on the internet, claiming that the Japanese government uses these schools to train spies. The key factor leading to the attacks was the influence from videos on social media. A clip filmed in Tokyo was widely circulated, recording a Chinese man spraying paint on a stone pillar in Yasukuni Shrine. However, Japanese people were not the only targets. Victims also included local residents. In 2022 in Suzhou, police arrested a Chinese woman right on the street, just because she was wearing a yukata, a traditional Japanese summer kimono. It can be seen that this extreme anti-Japanese trend is also a result of China's wolf warrior diplomacy policy. Some reports indicated that shops, restaurants, public facilities, and hospitals in China have refused to serve Japanese people. Even a man in Hainan province was stabbed to death for saying that Japan could win if war broke out between the two countries. Under President Xi Jinping's leadership, anti-Japanese actions and rhetoric have significantly increased. Part of the reason is that from elementary school, mainland students are taught their first history lessons about the suffering that Chinese people endured due to Japan during the war. They are taught that Japanese people are two-faced and do not feel remorse for their wartime past. Although the war ended long ago, it still deeply haunts the lives of Chinese people. Rise at the end of former Prime Minister Abe Shinzo. He ordered businesses to cut ties with Huawei, disrupting high-tech exchange activities between the two countries. Subsequently, within 3 years, citing economic security reasons, Prime Minister Kishida Fumio blocked high-tech industrial chains, causing Sino-Japanese trade to gradually decline and bilateral relations to become increasingly. The above is information about anti-Japanese sentiment in China. Goodbye and see you in the next